Okay, so as I said, today we will be discussing on data masking and encryption for data at rest and data in transit. So let's get started with today's class. Okay, so first we will discuss about data masking. So what do you understand by masking? What do you understand by mask? Any idea? We wear face masks. So what is that?
Yes, ma'am. Is to cover from like dust and all.
Yes. So basically here in security, mask means it's a kind of a shield. Okay, mask means a shield that will protect you from various things. Okay, various unwanted things. So here in security,
Mhm.
data masking means um, the shield that you apply to a data, okay, in order to protect the sensitive information or private information, okay, where it might be
Okay, ma'am.
visible to someone without clearance to the information. So here you are just protecting it, you are just shielding the data, okay, in a way that even if it is visible to some other person, then there will not be proper clearance to the information. Okay, so the as mentioned here, the primary function of masking data is to protect sensitive private information in situations where it might be visible to someone without clearance to the information. Okay, so let us just consider one example. Say imagine your organization, okay, is working with a contractor to build a database. Hmm. Now masking your data will allow the contractor to test the database environment only without having access to the actual sensitive customer information. So this is again one scenario where data masking can be used. Okay, now we look at uh, a number of security scenarios. Okay, so here we have a few of the top reasons that any enterprise business uses for their data. Okay, so first is to protect data from third party vendors. So here this means that the sharing of some data with third party marketers or consultants and others is sometimes needed. Okay, that is sometimes required, but however certain information needs to be kept confidential. Okay, so in such areas we can apply data masking. Next we have operator error. So basically you see enterprises trust their insiders uh, to make good decisions, but however due to as a result of operator error, they might have to face data breaches, and businesses can safeguard themselves with data masking. Okay, next we have not all operations require the use of entirely real or accurate data. So there are many functions within an IT department that don't need real data. For example, some testing and application use. For that, you may not need the accurate or real data. Okay, you can simply work with a copy of it. So defining data masking means understanding the important role it plays in your company's overall data security strategy. Next, we learn about some types of data masking. Now, there are a few different types of data masking to be aware of uh, as we will be considering the next steps. And okay, so basically there are two types. One is the static data masking and the other is dynamic data masking. Okay, so dynamic data masking is also known as the on the fly data masking. Okay, that is, it will happen in runtime, real time. Okay, so talking about static data masking, you see static data masking actually refers to the process in which important data is masked in the original database environment. The content is duplicated into a test environment and can then be shared around third-party vendors or other necessary parties. Okay. So data is masked and extracted in the production database and moved into the into the test database. Okay, and while this may be a necessary process for working with third-party consultants, however, it is not ideal. That is because, throughout the process of masking data for a duplicate database, real data is extracted, which can leave a backdoor open that will encourage more breaches. Okay, so this is not often found to be a very good idea. Next, we have dynamic data masking. So here, in dynamic data masking, automation and rules allow IT departments to secure data in real time. That means it never leaves the production database and as such is less susceptible to threats or prone to threats. Okay, so data is never exposed to those who access the database because the contents are jumbled in real time, making the contents inauthentic. Okay, so a resource called the dynamic masking tool finds and masks certain types of sensitive data, okay, using a reverse proxy. So only the authorized users will be able to see the authentic data. Okay, in any enterprise environment, always remember time is money, and even milliseconds of the time has got a value. And in addition to time considerations of running such a proxy, whether or not the proxy itself is secure can also be a major concern. Okay, and in addition to that, data performance also can be another concern here. Okay, next we discuss about the techniques used for data masking. Okay, so basically there are three techniques used: substitution, shuffling, and encryption. So substitution, as the name suggests, it means replacing. Okay, it means replacing or copying. So substitution copies the look and feel of the real data without compromising anyone's personal information. Okay, with this approach, a value that looks to be authentic is substituted for the actual value, and this hides the authentic data, protecting it from breaches. Okay, breach threats. Okay, next we have shuffling. So shuffling means rearranging the information, the characters or the information. So here uh, it uses one data set in place of another. Okay, but in shuffling, the data in an individual column is shuffled in a randomized fashion. Okay, so here we rearrange the columns. The output set looks like authentic data, but however, it does not reveal any personal information. Okay. Next, we have encryption. So encryption means to convert any information to some coded form so that anyone, any unauthorized person, even if he gets access to that, may not be able to read it. Okay, so when data is encrypted, authorized users must access it with a key, and this is the most complex and secure type of data masking. Here data is masked via an encryption algorithm. So you have learned about uh, encryption already in information security. So that is all about these three techniques. Okay, so we are done with the data masking. Okay, we have so far discussed the need for data masking, then the two types of data masking. Okay, then the techniques used for data masking. Now we come to the next topic, which is encryption for data at rest and data in transit. Okay, you see, um, first thing that we should know is how many states digital data can actually have. Okay, so digital data can be either in either of the two states, that is at rest and the other is in transit. So at rest, that means this is the initial state of any digital data. In very short terms, this indicates the data that is stored somewhere without being used or being transmitted to anyone. Okay. So see, from local hard drives to network attached storages, then from USB pen drives to mobile devices, or from system folders to database servers, any physical and logical storage system, unit or device is meant to be used to contain the data at rest, at least for a while until it is being sent. Okay. Next is in transit. So in transit means when the data is in motion. So this is relative to the data which is being transmitted somewhere to somewhere else. Okay. Um, so the basically the data transfer can take place between any number of parties, not limiting to just two, that is the sender or the receiver. For example, when we transfer a file from our desktop PC to our laptop using our LAN, we are basically performing a data transfer involving a single party, that is us only. Okay. Now, when submitting a transaction to a distributed database uh, such as a blockchain, we are enforcing a data transfer between an indefinite amount of parties. That means all the blockchain nodes. Okay, so transferring data need not always involve only two nodes, that is the sender or the receiver. There can be plenty parties in between. Okay, through which, via which the data transfer might take place, or there can be only us, that is you are, transfer when you are transferring your information from your desktop to your laptop using LAN. Okay, so where we will have only us as the nodes. Okay, next we talk about data encryption at rest. Okay, so from the definition of at rest, we have understood how this kind of data is typically in a stable state. Okay, it is not traveling within the system or network, and also it is not being acted upon by any application or third party. uh, it is something that has reached a destination, at least temporarily. Okay, now we talk about the reasons to use at rest. Okay, so why would we need to use data encryption at rest? First, we have three reasons. One might be due to physical theft, one might be due to logical theft, and the third is human error. So we will discuss each in details. Okay, so talking about physical theft, you see, um, say if our device is stolen, hmm, the encryption at rest will prevent the thief from being immediately able to access our data. Still, he can try to decrypt it by using brute force attack. Okay, brute force is, what is brute force attack? Where a person can go on, the attacker will go on finding the keys, okay, all the possible keys to decrypt the message. Okay, so that is the brute force attack. So if your device is stolen, okay, so then the thief might still try to decrypt it using brute force attack or other encryption cracking methods. But this is something that will take a reasonable amount of time. Okay, we should definitely be able to pull off the adequate countermeasures before that happens, such as, say, changing the account information he might be able to see, or somewhat use via the existing browsers, password managers, login cookies, email clients accounts, and so on. Then track our device or issue erase all data using our Google or Apple remote device management services, and so on. Okay, next is we have logical theft. So if our PC, website, or email account gets hacked by some unauthorized or malicious user or software, the encryption at rest will make the offender unable to access our data. that we understood. But even when stolen or downloaded, it's basically the same scenario of physical theft, except it is way more, you know, subtle, because most users or administrators won't even be aware of it. Lastly, we have human errors. So apart from physical or logical thefts, there are a lot of other scenarios where data encryption at rest could be a lifesaver. For example, if we lost our smartphone and someone else finds it, or if we make a mistake while assigning permissions, granting to unauthorized users or customers access to files, folders, data, they shouldn't be able to see. Or if we forget our local PC or email passwording, okay, thus allowing anyone who doesn't feel like respecting our privacy to take a look at our stuff. And the list could go on for a while. So this is how, you know, this is how you know, data could be stolen, okay, using by physical or logical means, or by human errors. So these are the reasons why we need data encryption at rest. Now we will learn how it can help us. Okay, well, to summarize all the points that we have covered so far, um, we can say that encrypting our data at rest could help us to better deal with a possible data breach. Okay, it won't be, however, if you know it, however, it won't help us to prevent that from happening, which is mostly a task for firewalls, antiviruses, okay, good practices and security protocols. But it will definitely give us the chance and time to set up the appropriate countermeasures, hopefully the overall, you know, minimizing the overall damage done by any possible leak. Okay, next we discuss how to implement it. Okay, now implementing a data encryption at rest security protocol might be either easy or hard depending on the following factors. First is, while physical and logical data sources or storages we want or we have to protect. So physical sources include hard disks, smartphones, USB pen drives, and so on, while logical sources would include the local or remote databases, then all the cloud-based assets, virtualized devices, and so on. Next, who needs to have access to this data? Okay, so uh, human beings, okay, that is all the local or remote users or the third parties connecting to us. Then we have human driven software such as MS Word, or automatic processes or services such as the backup tasks. Okay, then we have how much we are willing to sacrifice in terms of the overall performance or ease of access to increase the security. So can we ask to all our local and remote users to decrypt this data before being able to access them? Should we use a password, a physical token, or an OTP code? Can we make the encryption transparent enough to not, you know, affect our external users, and also to allow our software apps and tools to deal with the encrypted data whenever they'll need to deal with it? So it depends on all these queries. Okay, now we talk about data encryption in transit. Okay, see, as the name implies, data in transit should be seen much like a transmission stream. Um, one good example for this would be a typical web page that we receive from the internet whenever we surf the web. Okay, so here's what happens when we request for a web page. Okay, so first what happens is we send an HTTP request to the server hosting the website we are visiting. Then the web server accepts our request, processes it by finding the static or the dynamic content we have asked for, sends it to us as HTTP response over a given TCP port. And the TCP port is usually 80 for HTTP and 443 for HTTPS. Okay. Then thirdly, our client usually, which is a web browser such as Google Chrome, Firefox, or Edge, receives the HTTPS response, stores it on its internal cache, and shows it to us. Okay. Now, as we can see, there clearly is a data transmission going on between the server and the client. Okay. So during that transmission, the requested data, that is the HTML web page, okay, becomes a flow that goes through list 5 different states. One is it starts at rest, that is the server storage. Then it changes to in use, which is the web server memory. Then to in transit, that is using the hypertext transfer protocol on a given TCP port. Then again to in use, that is in web server. And finally to at rest, that is to the client cache. Okay. So these are the various phases. These are the various states the data, the data flow goes through when we request for a web page. Okay. Now we see, we will look at the reasons to use data encryption. Oh, sorry, this is data encryption. Okay, this should be in transit. Okay. Anyways, we will look at the reasons to use data encryption in transit. Okay. So first, let us assume that both the server and the client have implemented a strong level of data encryption at rest. That means, the first and the fifth state are internally safe. So here, this and this are internally safe. Okay. Because any intrusion attempt would be made against encrypted data. However, the third state where the data is in transit, that is in this, okay, might be encrypted or not depending on the protocol the server and the client are actually using to transmit the data. So therefore this will work as the weak spot for attack. Now we will look at what usually happens when the HTTP protocol is being used. Okay, see, as we can see, the security issue is quite evident when the web server processes the incoming request. Okay, when it will be processing the incoming request and transparently decrypts the requested data, the channel used to transfer it to the web client, okay, this channel using is not encrypted. As I said, this may or may not be encrypted. So this channel is still not encrypted. Therefore, any offending party that manages to successfully pull off a suitable attack could have immediate access to our unencrypted data. Okay, so this point will serve as the weak point when the information flow will take place from the web server through the unencrypted channel to the web client. Okay. Now we look at how it can help us. Okay. Uh, so first we should be aware of some possible threats, okay, that we might have to face during the information transmission. Okay. First is eavesdropping. So it is a network layer attack that focuses on capturing small packets from the network transmitted by other computers and reading the data content in search of any type of information. Okay. And next is the man in the middle attack, which is tampering based attack, where the attacker secretly relays or alters the communication between two parties to make them believe they are directly communicating with each other. So implementing proper encryption in transit protocols to secure our critical data transfer endpoints will definitely help us prevent these kinds of attacks. Uh, for example, we have, say, we have some examples here. So whenever the transmitting device is reachable via web interface, the web traffic should only be transmitted over the SSL, that is the secure socket layer, using strong security protocols such as the transport layer security. And this applies to any website or when reachable service, including email servers and the likes. Okay. And as of today, the best and easiest way to implement TLS security and implement the encryption in transit for any website is by obtaining a SSL TLS HTTPS certificate that will be, issued by the CA authorities or auto-generated through a self-signing process. Okay. Next, we have any data transmitted over email should be secured using cryptographically strong email encryption tools such as SMIME or PGP. Um, so although these protocols perform their encryption at uh, client level, that is at when the data is at rest, they are also great to protect the in-transit flow of an email message. Next, third, we have any binary data should be encrypted using proper file encryption tools before being attached to email and transmitted in any other way. So most compression protocols, including the ZIP, RAR, they support a decent level of password protected encryption nowadays. So using them is often a great way to add an additional level of security and reduce the attachment size at the same time. So lastly, we have non-web transmission of text and binary data should also be encrypted via application level encryption, taking the following scenarios into account. First is if the application database resides outside the application server, then the connection between the database and the application should be encrypted using FIPS compliant cryptographic algorithms. And lastly, whenever application level encryption is not available, implement network level encryption such as the IPsec or SSH tunneling, and ensure that the transmission itself is performing under authorized devices operating within protected subnets with strong firewalls like VPN and alikes. Okay, so this is all for today's class.